Afraid demo number 2. From demo to disc, this is Anatomy of a Song.
Can we take it from the top?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Anatomy of a Song. I'm your host, Greg Smith, and joining me today is Gavyn Thorsell. Thorsell?
Yes, sir.
Did I say that right?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get the bio stuff out of the way. So, where are you from?
Well, I was born in a little town called Melrose, Florida, and then I lived there until I was about 10, and then I eventually moved up to the Appalachian Mountains here in Blairsville, Georgia, and have lived there since I've lived here since I was 10, and I'm 18 now. So, yeah.
Brothers, sisters?
Yeah, I have a little sister who's actually she's just getting into music, and she is a phenomenal singer.
Really?
Yeah, no, she's way better than me.
Great.
Kid has all the talent.
Let's get her over here to the studio.
I'm gonna have to get her in here.
Always looking for good singers. Turn this off. Mom and dad musicians? Were they musical?
Actually, quite the contrary. My dad was the captain of the football team kind of dude, and just kind of went through high school doing all that kind of stuff, and then he did a lot of stuff with the church. And then my mom was a soccer player, a volleyball player, and I think a softball player. And she was like the head of every team that she was on. I think that she got a scholarship for volleyball that she never ended up going to use. But yeah, so me and my little sister, it was a total surprise because we are absolute music kids. And my parents were the jock sport kids. Like,
it's funny.
I listened to the music that was in my parents' era, and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, like what do you think of like these musicians or whatever?" I'll be like, "Yeah, like John Resnick for the Goo Goo Dolls and everything." And she's just like, "Oh, I have no idea who that is." It's like it's so funny because I know more about the music from even their era than they do. But
so, music in your house growing up. What was playing in your house growing up? What your parents weren't musical; they weren't musicians. But was there music in your house growing up?
So this is actually going to be pretty funny. My parents, really all I grew up with was like whatever was on country radio. I mean, like the Luke Bryan, like that kind of stuff. And then also like contemporary Christian was a lot within my parents. But my grandparents is where I really got into music and starting to get into like more of the alternative side of music. My grandfather is one of the biggest Bob Dylan fans you'll ever meet in your life. So that was a huge influence. Same with Jim Croce and James Taylor. And then my Mimi was super into like Elton John and the Beatles and all that. And so that was kind of like the start of me getting like really into music. It was that 70s, 60s era stuff. And then my grandfather also surprisingly got me into the country that I'm into now, because he was a really big Chris Stapleton fan. Chris Stapleton started becoming big. So, and then my uncle I can't leave out my Uncle Joey. He introduced me to a lot of like the alternative, like heavy rock elements, like from the 80s and then even into the 2000s, like with like the new metal and everything. And I'm super into that. But he also introduced me to like artists like Tyler Childers, and like the Steel Drivers, which I mean was Chris Stapleton, but that's what really ignited the spark in me to want to be a writer as far as like what I do now.
Let's geek out for a second on instruments. So,
boy,
your first guitar.
Oh, my first guitar. Oh, you're gonna laugh at this. So I'm left-handed, but I play right-handed. But whenever I started guitar, technically, was when I was 9 years old, and my parents got me a left-handed guitar because they thought that was the thing that was right. Because, I mean, that was, like, what they were thinking. And I was taking guitar lessons at Guitar Center. And as I'm 9, I had so many different interests. And I'm so ADHD and all over the place, I just kind of didn't pick it up. And then eventually my guitar teacher was like, hey, you know what? You should try right-handed so you can play other guitars. And I ended up getting this Laguna electric that was like this little crappy electric, and played that a bit. Never really picked up guitar after like taking like 5 months of lessons, and I put it down for like 3 years, and then COVID hit, And when COVID hit, I had nothing to do. I was never had any gaming like systems or anything as a kid. So I was just totally alone in my room, nothing to do. And there was that guitar sitting in the corner of the room. And I just picked it up. I learned Come As You Are by Nirvana. And from that moment on, I was hooked. And then I had this little acoustic that I picked up at a thrift store for like $7. It was called 222. It was some really random thing. My aunt ran it over with a car once, and it was still together. My grandfather like put wood glue on the back, sanded it down, threw it on red. Yeah. But that was my first acoustic that I like really learned off of, and then also that Laguna as well.
Do you still have those guitars?
The 222 I ended up giving to a neighbor kid that I was showing a little bit of stuff on guitar, but I was like, you know what? Like it's falling apart anyways. The action's like a mile high. It's just like I'll pass it on to the next person. Yeah. But then after that, I had a Fender acoustic that's still in my family because my little cousin plays that I ended up giving to him, and then I have my gigging instruments now as far as guitars that I play acoustic, which is Takamine. I have a Chinese Takamine that's it's fairly decent, but my favorite one is the one sitting next to me, and this is a 1988 Takamine, and let me find them, EN15, and it's the most beautiful sounding guitar I think I've ever picked up.
Let's hear it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Now we haven't mic'd your guitar, but that doesn't matter. Just noodle a little bit. I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, Sweet. I love the chime on this thing.
It's got good sustain. It's still ringing as you're putting it back in the stand.
I know. Yeah. It's the most gorgeous thing ever.
Yeah, I like Takaminis, and they're really popular.
Yeah, they're the electronics in it is what got me.
Yeah.
And that's what I've heard. As an 88 with the original electronics is better than my newer one.
Is that right?
It's absolutely gorgeous.
That's a lot of the times that's the case. I've got I do Taylor acoustics. I tried Martin for a while. It didn't quite fit my hand. One day I picked up a Taylor. There's a funny story about. I actually met Andy Summers of the Police. He's the guy who does all the
yeah.
Through I used to have a job in radio, and so I was a producer for an interview that he did, and he brought in a guitar, and it was a Taylor. I'd never seen one. This is back in the 90s. And I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "Oh, it's a Taylor, mate." You know, and he's a little guy. I said, "I've never seen one." He goes, "Yeah, we'll try it out." You know, and I played it, and I was hooked. And like the next day, I went to a small guitar store and found one, and then bought another, and eventually met Bob Taylor. And they just their guitars sort of fit my hand.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that. I've played plenty of Taylors.
Yeah. Well, there's one.
Yeah. Oh, that's super cool. I like the slotted headstocks.
That's a steel string. That's an 812. It's kind of set up like
I like it. It's kind of has that bluegrass setup with like the flatter back.
Yep. That's a real friendly guitar, and I love the sound of Taylors. They fit my hands, and I like it for noodling. Found that one in Salt Lake City. Guy was selling it, and got a good price on it. Yeah,
that's super cool. Yeah. I love the slotted headstocks. There's one that I picked up that I actually really liked. I think it was a 314.
Yeah.
Can't remember, or no, it was a 324. But it was
Taylor,
super cool. Yeah, I think it's 324 is what it was, and it was a shorter neck, and it had the slotted headstock. Because I like that Taylor. They definitely have a thing where they'll just like make the most crazy looking guitars because they have the ability to. I mean, their wood library is insane. Yeah. So
I've actually seen it.
Yeah.
I actually went out to California once to say hello to Bob Taylor. It's a long story. I met him over email and then regular mail, and then we kind of became
slowly became
friends a little bit. And I haven't talked to him in years and years, but I bought a bunch of his stuff and actually ended up with a 9-string guitar, which after we finished the interview, it's sitting right over there. I play it a lot. It's kind of a hybrid between a 6 and a 12. It's a 9-string guitar, but like you said, Taylor can do that. You know, so they did the NAMM show. You know, the National Association of Music Manufacturers.
I've always wanted to go.
Me too. I've never been. Yeah, never been. But I have a friend who goes, and he'll come back and he'll say, Greg, I picked up a guitar at NAMM, and the big boys, you know, the Fenders and the Gibsons and the Takamines and the Taylors, they all bring like a special guitar that they built especially for. So one year they built a 9-string.
Nice.
And at the end of it, a friend of mine who owns a music shop in Catonsville, Maryland, bought a 9-string and called me and said, "Hey, have I got something for you?" So I said, "Oh God!" So I went up there and played it, and it's like immediately fell in love with it. So, but I didn't buy it, and then it ended up in a store in South Dakota. And I ran across it again, and I didn't have the money for it. It was really expensive. So
Yeah, all those custom tailor things are, they get up there.
I let it go, and I walked away from it, and it was the one that got away. And then I told this story to a friend of mine, dear old friend. We've known each other since college, and I actually then had a windfall about 6 months later. Had some money come in after I sold a house. I had a little bit of money left over. And so I called the shop out in South Dakota. I said, "I want that 9-string. Oh, sorry, we just sold it." So I was like, I missed it twice.
Depression.
Missed it twice. 2 months later was my birthday, and my friend from college had bought it.
Oh, well, I mean, at least it was
And
somebody.
she handed it to me on my birthday. She said that was such a good story.
That is the best
I
thing
called
ever.
it the next thing. Oh, it's just she's such a dear friend, and it really touched my heart. And it's an amazing. I'll let you play it after we finish here.
Yeah,
and
for
bust
sure.
out the case, but it's
Definitely interesting.
it'll change your life. Well, this is,
Changed my life.
I was gonna actually leads to another question, which is there are certain guitars that I have that have songs in them.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Okay, well, tell me about songs and guitars for you. What are your experience?
I would say, with my experience, the one that I surprisingly like to write on the most is actually not even this one. Is I have this Guild Troubadour, which they're just this small budget brand guitar that Guild makes, and I take it everywhere with me. I mean, there's never a moment I really don't have a guitar. I just can't stand it, because if I have an idea, I want to play it. Also, super socially awkward guy, and if I'm in a social event to the point where it's just like everybody's doing their own thing, and it's at a point where I have to stay there, and if I have a guitar, I'm going to go find the closest corner and go play guitar. It's just like, I don't know what else to do. And but that Guild Troubadour has recently been like the biggest thing for writing. Another thing I've been doing recently, because I'm working over with my dad at a sign shop, and I'm just out of high school. Like, I finished up high school early, so I'm graduated not technically graduated, but I finished high school like 3-4 weeks ago. And so now that I'm working semi full time, on my lunch break, I always go up to this little spot on the lake, and there's this little pull off, and I'll go and I'll sit back there, and I have an SUV, so I'll just put all the seats down in the back, sit in the back, or I'll like open the door if the weather's good, and I'll just write on my hour lunch break and just play. And I've found a lot of inspiration in that. It's also stemmed from an interview that I listened to, and it's weird and it's obscure and hard to find, but it's a interview, or it's not an interview, but it's a documentary that BBC Radio did, I think in like 2003, on Jeff Buckley. And it was the whole life story of Jeff Buckley and how he recorded his time in New York, his time in Memphis, and that kind of reignited a spark in writing for me, just hearing his story and his thoughts on music and how he viewed things and how he viewed being an artist. Just recently, him as a person has been a really huge influence to me, and it's recently had me to where I'm just like, I want to take that Troubadour everywhere, and I want to write everywhere, and I want to just see it and interpret it in a new way. So recently that's been it. And then this guitar just always seems to pull out the sad emo stuff out of me.
Is that right?
Like it always has me playing those weird chords, and I'm just like, there's something sad and great in here.
This is the old Takamine you're talking
Oh
about.
yeah,
Sitting
that's
next
the
to you.
old Takamine. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, because each guitar, it's funny talking with musicians and non-musicians, because I will talk with non-musicians about instruments. Certain instruments have songs in them and have a certain mood. Like, that's your emo guitar. I have a guitar just like that. If I want to go dark and melodic and this is depressing and I'm really sad, there's certain guitars, they got that nice baritone kind of thing going on. It's kind of deep resonant sound.
Yeah, real chimey, just kind of
exactly
rings out. fills a room.
Yeah, and you can't write a sad song on a 12-string.
Oh no, it's impossible.
It's just too jangly and it's too happy and it's wonderful and it's happy and you're playing happy. But yeah, I know just what you mean. Mm-hmm. Do you play any other instruments?
Yeah, I was a bass player for forever. I started music because I do country now, and I started in a band called B29 at the time, and that was in middle school. I was the lead singer of it, and we were like an alternative rock emo band. Yeah. And I played guitar in that, but I really just started. But I ended up leaving that band, and we were opening for this band called Brother. And I was good friends with their guitar player because I used to work with him at this little music store called Megatone in my hometown because I worked there for the past 3 years. And I ended up talking with Chandler, who's the lead singer, Chandler Malin, and he was like, hey, we need a bass player because Cody's this insane guitar player. Because Cody was playing bass at the time, and he's like one of the greatest I've ever had the honor of being around. And he's like, it'd be cool if you hopped on bass. And I was like, I've never played it, but sure. So I hopped on bass, and I'm 16 years old at the time. I'm playing with a 20-year-old drummer, let's see, how old is Chandler? Chandler's 25 now, so like 23-year-old, like 23-year-old lead singer, and then Cody's like 25 at the time. And so I'm this baby of this band. And I played with them for 2 years, traveled to California, did all this stuff, and that was like a huge thing for me. And playing bass really opened me up as far as a guitar player, because I felt like I was just like that Zach Bryan, like I could only, I hate to say that about Zach Bryan, but like that kind of like country, just like that very folky kind of thing where it's like just need to stick to the cowboy chords. And I felt like I was kind of stuck in that. And then playing in that band and playing bass kind of just opened me up to a whole nother style of playing and a whole nother way to look at the guitar as an expressive of an instrument. Because as I play a lot of percussion, like rhythm kind of stuff, because mainly I have to depend on myself for live performance, and then even in recording, I've learned how to make the guitar sound like more than just the guitar, if that makes any sense.
Totally. Yeah.
So
yeah, it's the funny thing about bass is when and I've always played guitar, but I picked up bass. Very somewhat similar story. Mine was that I was in a studio and I was kind of a house producer, and one day they needed a bass player, and the guy we usually call was unavailable, and I was like, how hard can this be? So I went out and I bought a bass, and it's actually, I still have it. It's a really good bass. It's a Rickenbacker. It's a 4001.
Oh my gosh, I love Ricks.
They're great.
They're the best thing ever. I almost bought an 80. It was an 88.
Yep.
Rickenbacker, and it was aged, and I almost dropped $2,000 on that thing, and it was the one that got away.
Mine's an old one. There's a great story about it. Mine's a 72. Ooh. And it's
so like the Paul McCartney era.
It's the Paul McCartney.
It's the Paul McCartney.
It is the Paul McCartney. It's natural wood with a white pick guard. It's like
the whole nine
it's
like the one you use in the wings.
Exactly.
I think because he had two in the wings. He had one that was like a white, and then
one was red. I think.
Yeah, that was it.
And the red one he actually had back in the Beatles as well, because you can see it. Yeah, they have a new documentary called Get Back, and he plays it a couple times.
He's mostly playing that was towards the end of Get Back.
Yeah.
Because I love that documentary too. That's an amazing one.
But the funny story about the 72 Rickenbacker was that I bought it because we needed a bass player, and I kind of picked it up, and then years later I wanted to get a jazz bass because everyone had jazz bass on it, and the Rickenbacker is great, but it's a pig. It is just fat, and it's heavy, and it's a slab of wood. It has an amazing sound. I didn't appreciate what I had, so I sold it, and I bought this jazz bass. I hated the jazz bass almost immediately. I went out and I got this, which is a Yamaha.
Oh, yeah.
Which I modded. I took off the plastic on the top down of the wood, and this is, it's just a Yamaha. It's like a $300 bass, but it's the one I record with. This has the greatest sound.
Yeah, because it has that jazz P bass configuration.
It does. It's got the two.
There's another one that Yamaha makes that's really cool that I almost bought from a buddy, but I don't know if you know about the Struts. They're a band out of the UK, but their bass player Jetto is a big influence of mine. He plays one like it, and it has that jazz
P bass pickup,
pickup configuration, and it sounds great. That is probably my favorite kind of sound But
Yeah.
I could never. I hate P basses. Like it's my
They're
hot
so
take.
heavy.
Their necks are too wide for me, and I usually like
That's
a
funny.
wide neck.
Yeah, see, you're like me. You can't see us here, but my hands are small. I got smaller hands.
Like
and
I have a medium sized hand. I just don't like the P bass.
I don't like it. No, and the head. This is my. God bless Leo Fender. Okay, and the P bass. You can't say anything bad about the P bass because it's the gold standard.
Yeah, it's the bass.
It's the bass. But for me, the headstock is heavier than the body. So when you're playing, I'm not only playing, but I'm holding the head out the whole time.
The only time that I like that is with a Mustang bass because that's one of my favorites.
And I have a Mustang, and I love my Mustang. It's actually one that I got out of prison.
Heck yeah!
I was telling Gavyn about before. I also run a charity called Inside Voices United. You should check it out, InsideVoicesUnited.org. And we go into prisons and we record prisoners. And if they need instruments, we provide instruments. So I went into this one prison, and they had this Mustang, and the key was broken, and one of the strings wasn't, and the nut was chipped. And so I took it back, and I couldn't get the parts for it, so I bought them another bass. And it sat on my bench for a while, and I finally found the right parts for it and fixed it up again. It's got all these chips and things like that from people whacking it around because it's prison.
It adds character.
It had character. So I put some flat wound strings on, and it's killer. It's a great bass.
Mustang with flat wounds is just superb.
It's butter. It is.
This is a hot take, which any real bass player that listens to this is probably about to like convulse and die from the words I'm about to say. But Mustang bass, flat wound strings, vibrato, and then a little bit of distortion, and play it with a pick is the best bass tone I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And on the one song I recorded with Brother, which was called Tea and Whiskey, that's what I did. And I absolutely love that sound. Everybody was like, you need to do this on a P bass because of that. And I'm just like, nope, flat wounds, pick now. And they're like, okay, so you got the brain of a monkey, but it's okay. You're a bass player.
Do you still have that bass?
Yes, I still have that bass.
You do?
It's
awesome.
I aged the crap out of it. My guitar player thought I was crazy because it's a Squier bass. It was my first bass that I had, and it the Seafoam green because it was the classic vibe is what the series from Squier was. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I want to customize this. So I took it outside. I'm at my buddy Chandler's house, who's the lead singer, Brother. Yeah. And I just start taking it against the concrete and just, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm just like, "Cool shit." And then I took a lighter and I was like, flaming the headstock, trying to make it look like there was cigarette burns.
People pay good money for road-worn guitars.
Yeah, it's like Fender, hit me up. I'll work in your custom shop now.
I know how to do it. Just take it out in the driveway and beat the hell out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get around to the way that we do this podcast. Is I like to find one song that you've done that you want to talk about. And let's talk a little bit about, first of all, what's the name of the song?
The song is called Postcard.
Postcard, okay.
Yeah, and it'll probably be out by the time this podcast is out, but it comes out tomorrow relative to today.
Awesome, good. Well, we're going to have links on our... as part of this podcast, at the end of it, we'll give a link as to where you can find it.
Awesome.
And we'll also maybe we'll get a cut from it with your permission. We'll tail that, put a little bit of it at the end of this interview
of course.
as well.
Yeah, you're all good to do that.
Cool. So was it always Postcard, or was that always the title of it, or music first, lyrics first? Walk me through inspiration at the beginning. Where does it come from?
The inspiration is kind of a long story. So
that's why we're here.
So last year was probably the craziest part of my career, and I was doing a bunch of stuff, and I'm on TikTok a little bit, and I'm no big artist, and I'm so bad at social media. Everybody has always called me an old soul, but I'm 18, but I act like I'm 95. And I don't know how to use technology. I don't know what's trendy. I'm so bad at all that stuff. But I posted a video, and this kid hits me up named Roland, and he's just like, "Hey man, I really like your sound." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." He's like, "You're never gonna believe me, but I'm Zach Bryan's cousin." And I was like, "It's like, yeah, sure you are, buddy." Right. And he's like, "No, I'm gonna prove it to you." So he sends me all these these pictures of just family photos, and I was like, "Holy shit, he's not lying." And so I'm like, "Oh, that's super cool, dude," and talked to him for a little while, and then he's like, "Hey, my Uncle Dwayne, he has these events over here in Copan, Oklahoma. You should try to come to one of them." So I end up getting in contact with Dwayne, And Dwayne says yes. So last year of November, it was around Veterans Day, we go and do this thing called Dad's Walk, which it's for this charity for a cancer walk that that Zach Bryan's dad does. And he invites us out to play on like the little side stage. And it was me and my buddy Sam Inslee, who's been like my right-hand man for about a year now. And we fly out there with my dad, and we go and play this event, and we meet all these really, really cool people. There's some amazing artists to definitely go check out. Names like Emily Hogstead, Tyler Anthony, Stone Mendez, and got to commune with them and artists about my size. And then at the end of, like, towards the middle of the day, here comes walking up Mr. Zach Bryan. So, like, we're like, holy crap, like, he's here. So I was like, I felt like a rock star. It's like I'm hanging out with Zach Bryan, and I became really good friends with his cousins. And I'm really close with one of his cousins, Jalen. And then he also has a friend, Gage Grant, who's an amazing artist. Like, one of my favorite people of all time. Like, Gage has the coolest mustache and the coolest personality of all time. And so I'm really good friends with them, and we were getting close with each other during that event last year. And so I kind of had a little bit of an inside. So, like, I was hanging out around Zach's little group, just as a person and not as like somebody trying to go take a picture. And I got to talk to him a bit, and me and Zach had a little conversation that year, and we were just talking about music, and he was just talking about like what he was up to and like how it's been. And he had just met the Kings of Leon, and I didn't know who that was. And it was funny because I was like talking, I was like, oh yeah, like I really wasn't into country at first, and I was into indie rock and everything. And then he starts talking about the Kings of Leon, which is like one of the biggest indie bands of all time. And here's dumb me who has no idea who they are. And I was like, oh, so that's who was on your Instagram. And he's like, yeah. I was like, oh yeah, I'll have to check them out. I was like, dude, you don't know who the Kings of Leon is? You're over here like bragging like you're some indie like Vassant. And I'm like, oh man. So it's like got humbled a little bit by Zach Bryan, which was awesome. And but that was like highlight of like my life at the time. And I'd never done anything like that. I'd never traveled like that for music. And it was like, holy crap, like this is happening. And then right after that, I was still in Brother at the time, and we ended up getting this opportunity called Springboard West. And Springboard is this huge event and conference so that musicians can come and like kind of learn more about the industry. Really, it's just like it's based upon teaching musicians how to gear yourself to where you not only know the music, but you can also navigate the business properly so you don't get screwed over. It's a really great foundation that they run. And that was in San Diego, California. So the whole band is going to San Diego. And that was so cool. And I felt like a total rock star because this stuff is happening within 1 month of each other. Like, I went to Oklahoma in November, and I was going to California in January. And I came back from Oklahoma knowing that I was going to be going to California. And I was like, holy crap, like, it's happening. Like, this is, like, my dream. It's coming true. And I was like, I want to write a song about this. And, like, I had...
And this is the genesis of Oklahoma, right?
This is the genesis, of Postcard.
A Postcard, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So hold that thought, because I'm really finding everything you're talking about, this is so interesting, and the whole journey and stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm actually going to cut this into 2 episodes. So we're going to say this is the end of episode 1 with Gavyn Thorsell. And join us for episode 2, which will actually be episode 4B. I don't know. It'll make sense.
Yeah, it'll make sense.
And, join us for the second half of this conversation in a moment. But for now, this is Anatomy of a Song. And that's our episode for today. Anatomy of a Song was written and produced at The Sawmill in Blairsville, Georgia. As always, feel free to contact me with your questions and or thoughts on your own composing and recording process. Our email address is, it's one long word, anatomyofasongpodcast@gmail.com. I'm your host, Greg Smith. We'll see you next time on Anatomy of a Song.